welcome, to this workshop. We usually do this in person. This is our first try as doing this as a webinar. I'm going to share my screen. Let's see here. Okay. I just want to give you an outline of what we'll be covering through the afternoon. We'll do an introduction, and then it's going to be a little bit of a tour of CropManage, and then some hands-on, how do you set up your ranch or farm in CropManage and your crops in CropManage. Then we take a break, and then we get more into detail about how to add, we call events into CropManage, and learn how to tune those. So that will take us right through the afternoon, and we have these question answer places, breaks and question and answers. And we'll even have a few quiz or polls just to make sure that everyone's following along. So let me give you just a background about CropManage. So I'm located on the Central Coast. Andre and I are both farm advisors with UC Cooperative Extension with responsibilities in irrigation and water quality. And we both also work in nutrient management of the crops that are grown on the Central Coast of California. And sort of the situation here is that we have a huge diversity of crops that we produce, from all sorts of vegetables to berries, many small fields to manage. We also have a shortage of labor, and these are high value crops. And fertilizer and water are often a small fraction of growing costs. So when we're trying to manage nutrients and water on the coast, it can be challenging for these grower operations. And through the consistent production of vegetables and berries on the coast over many years, our groundwater, which we rely on for both irrigation and drinking water, has become contaminated with high nitrates in the groundwater. And for this reason, the water quality regulations that growers are facing are only getting more strict. The updated water quality regulations that will be in our area of the Central Coast are going to limit the discharge of nitrogen from farms to the groundwater and to surface water. And so these restrictions get more difficult over time. So for growers to comply with these regulations and just to use nutrients more efficiently and nitrogen more efficiently, it's really come to the point where we have to move from sort of a template approach to managing nitrogen with different crops to really accounting for all sources of nitrogen that can contribute to the crop production. So this would be the residual mineral nitrogen that's already there in your soil, also accounting for nitrogen that might be in your irrigation water, and estimating nitrogen mineralization from soil or amendments that are added to the soil, as well as the previous crop residues. And one of the key tools that we've been using on the Central Coast is the soil nitrate quick test. It is an easy way for growers to assess before they fertilize whether they have enough mineral nitrogen in their soil. But we also have to put that in the context of the demand of the crop demand for nitrogen through the growing cycle. So early on, for example, a lettuce crop takes up very little nitrogen for the first 30 days, but after about 30 days, the uptake rate increases a lot to 3 to 4 pounds of N per acre per day. And so for different commodities, these uptake curves will vary. Now, one of the key ways to manage nitrogen efficiently is to make sure your irrigation is efficient too. And one of the ways we can be better at irrigation scheduling is taking advantage of weather-based systems like the network of weather stations we have in California, part of the CIMIS system, that's the California Irrigation Management Information System, which for about 150 sites through the growing regions of California, they provide reference ET data. And that reference ET data, together with a crop coefficient, can be used to estimate what's the right amount of water to apply to a crop to satisfy its water demand and minimize the leaching of nitrate, which is very mobile in soil. One of the issues has been that for many of these different vegetable crops we grow on the Central Coast, we don't have good crop coefficients. So what we've been doing over the years is getting a sense of the fractional cover development over the season and relating that to a crop coefficient. And then there's other information, we need to put together to figure out a good irrigation schedule. We need to understand, what's the water holding capacity of the soil, the depth of the roots as the crop is developing, and to understand the uniformity of that irrigation system and to convert it, the recommendation into hours to operate your system. We need to know the application rate of the system and take into account the salinity of your water source. So it's quite challenging to sort of implement this strategy of water and nitrogen management on many fields, because growers on the Central Coast have so many different fields to manage and track. And so when you start talking about doing different practices in different fields at different stages of the crop, it becomes very complicated to manage. And of course, growers and farm managers have many other decisions to consider, such as harvests and sprays for pesticides, weeding, cultivation. So there's all these other activities going on. And so what we are presenting is something that's involving calculations, which we know is quite time consuming. And so thinking about how can we facilitate better management of water and nutrients using this approach, we realized we are going to need some type of software application that can automate it. And that's really what was the, I guess, the reason we started developing CropManage. And this is just a screenshot of how it looks today. So what CropManage really does is provides site-specific recommendations for irrigation, nitrogen management based on soil type, climate, crop type, and the crop development stage. And we're developing these recommendations based on research that we convert into algorithms to sort of guide those recommendations. And also CropManage is a way to maintain records of how much water and nutrients in terms of fertilizer that you are putting on each of your crops, which is good to have. Over time, you can look back on what you did on a particular crop, but it's also convenient if you're talking about exporting information to regulatory agencies and keeping it all in one place. So when we were designing CropManage, we realized for it to be easy for growers, we can't have them entering lots of data all the time. It's got to be very quick and simple to use. So the idea is to have a database, which is basically a complicated spreadsheet that's hosted in the cloud on a web service server. and it retains all the information. So once you put information in, it's retained for your ranch. So in that database, we might set up information about what type of soil you have on your different fields or orchards. We can designate different weather stations that we can automatically pull in weather data. And then in the field, if you wanted to take a soil test or a leaf sample test, you could enter those values when you have those right into the CropManage application, and it stores it and associates it with that planting. And we do have the capability to bring information in from field sensors such as soil moisture sensors or flow meters. What is also, I think, unique about CropManage is using that data, we can put it through these models that can give a irrigation recommendation or a nitrogen fertilizer recommendation. And then, as I mentioned, all the data is available. You can display it at any point or export it for your records. So we currently support a number of different vegetable crops, everything from broccoli to tomato and pepper. And we started working on perennial crops, first with strawberries and raspberries, which we grow on the Central Coast, but we've branched out to perennial crops in the Central Valley of California, such as almond, walnut, and alfalfa. So it's pretty simple to get started with CropManage. You just open your browser to cropmanage.ucnr.edu. The login is free to establish. And then you set up your ranch, and we're going to go through that. And then you add plantings to fields or planting areas in your ranch. And then you enter maybe a soil test or fertilizer or irrigation event that's associated with those plantings. Now, there's always concern about the privacy of the data. And so CropManage is now hosted on Amazon Web Service, which is a professional service that uses all the latest security and privacy protocols. We designed CropManage to allow multiple users to view and update the information for a planting or a crop, but there's a ranch owner for each ranch who starts that ranch, and they would designate which users have access to the data and also set the level of access. I mentioned CropManage brings in reference ET data for California from 150 stations. You have the option to use multiple stations. We have what we call sequential mode, where you can designate your first choice of a station, or you can average multiple stations available. And then CIMIS, which is operated by the Department of Water Resources, also has a spatial CIMIS product that's based on satellite. We also include historical reference ET data, because when we're looking in the future, we can rely somewhat on the historical ET information to estimate what the water use would be. If you're not located in California, or you have your own reference ET information, you can enter that information manually, and we will show you how to do that later in the workshop. For soil types, you don't have to look that up at another source. You simply can use the web browser, and as you go through setting up your ranch, you just click on your fields and you'll see the soil type information come in. And that's one of the advantages of sort of a web-based application. We didn't have to develop this tool. UC Davis developed Soil Web, and we just brought that in as part of CropManage. So I mentioned that we can also bring in sensor data, and one of the sensors we're very interested in as irrigation people is to have flow meters and bring that information right in to our into CropManage. And so we can see when somebody's irrigating and how often they're irrigating within CropManage. And even minute by minute, how that irrigation flow rate was operating. So another unique feature I think about CropManage is we're constantly doing trials to make sure the algorithms are accurate. We don't want growers using this software and finding out, the recommendations are not good. So we've done irrigation trials as well as nutrient or nitrogen use trials for many crops that are included in CropManage. Here's an example of romaine lettuce with the irrigation trial where we put on 100, as well as 150% of crop ET recommended by CropManage. And we also have treatments where we put less than 100% on there. And so we evaluate the yield, and what we want to see is that the 100% recommendation maximizes yield. So there's always a question, are growers using CropManage? And we think they definitely are. Since we started in 2011, we have more than 2,200 registered users that created more than 1,600 ranches, more than 7,200 plantings. They've entered more than 11,000 soil samples, and CropManage has made more than 70,000 recommendations. And you can see, the number of recommendations per month has steadily grown to above 2,000 per month. So different users utilize CropManage differently. Some are interested in it for just irrigation scheduling. Others are interested in it for nitrogen fertilizer management. Some use it just to train their farm staff. They might pick a field and utilize CropManage to compare it to what their farm staff is doing. Some users are interested in just utilizing CropManage to estimate seasonally how much water or nitrogen their crops might need. Others are very interested in using it for regulatory compliance, just keeping records of what they're doing. And then we have a number of colleges and universities that will utilize CropManage for training students. And then us in cooperative extension or doing applied research will utilize CropManage just to keep track of our trials. So learning more about CropManage, you're doing the right thing. You're attending our CropManage workshop, so that's a good way to learn more. We can do targeted trainings, come to your operation if you're nearby, and work with your employees so they understand how to use CropManage. We do have some help links, and you can send us a message from within CropManage if you're having any trouble. And we even have what I call the CropManage hotline, which is my office. So you can give me a call if you're really having problems. So just to summarize, CropManage is really a tool that repackages the research we do at the University of California into simple to use decision support tools to help you take all our research and interpret it for your conditions. So it's designed to support growers and crop consultants in water and nitrogen management decisions. And we're always, pursuing opportunities to expand CropManage to additional commodities and add new features and data sources. So with that, what I'd like to do is just give you a little tour. Hopefully it doesn't take too long to just show you the sort of the lay of the land of CropManage. So this is how your screen will look when you log on to CropManage. And I just want to give you a quick overview here. So notice the menu in the upper left-hand corner, and then over to the right, you have your language preference, and we have translated a lot of CropManage into Spanish. You'll see a list of ranches, and one in particular that you'll see is the UCC ranch. Everyone who logged in with the workshop part of CropManage can have access to this practice ranch that we call UCCE ranch. So just showing you the menu here. If you're a little lost and you need to get back to just the overview of the ranches, which is equivalent to the farms, then we would go right here. You won't have this admin part into the menu. You do have a profile. So here you can see that if you want to change your password over to the right here. And we do have a link to help. And we've created some tutorials. So if there's information you don't feel comfortable or you didn't understand it, maybe you can come here and look it up. We do have a feedback link here, so you can tell us what you think. If you have a problem, this would be a place to add information. And you will see a donate button here. I just wanted to mention, CropManage has been supported completely by grants for a number of years since we started. We're continuing to look for grant money, but we have to support a full-time programmer to keep this software going and keep it updated. So, if your operation, is making better use of CropManage, we would appreciate, support to keep it going. So there's, I'm going to just have to briefly change back here to show you some terms we have in using CropManage. Let's see here. So we have a number of terms we use in CropManage just to be clear as we work with different regions and with different commodities. You'll hear the term ranch, and that's the same as, say, a farm. Let's see here. Within a ranch, we have these planting areas, which is just a generic way of saying a field, a block, a lot, or an orchard. And then within any planting area, we'll refer to this term plantings, and those could be, a crop or an orchard. And then another term we'll use often are events. So that's when, you irrigate, you soil sample, you take a tissue sample. Those are events that you associate with a planting. We've talked about different commodities that might be tomato or lettuce, but also the term crop type, which could be a type of tomato, like processing tomato or cherry tomato or romaine lettuce, or it may be the planting configuration, romaine lettuce on 40-inch beds. So there's sort of this hierarchy of terms that we use. So planting areas are within a ranch, and then you add plantings to your planting areas, and then events to those plantings. So we have our ranches, and then you have your list of ranches, and you can look those up just by typing in the name. So if I want the UCCE ranch, I can do that. You can designate it as a favorite ranch, some ranch you always need to get to and quickly. So that's done by starring it, or I can unstar it like that. And you'll see it will show you how many active plantings or crops are in the ground on that ranch. So here we have 5 example ones. You can look up just by clicking on the first letter of the ranch. And you also will see over to the right this button for creating ranches. So that's the green button, and later we'll be doing that. You can see a list of public ranches. So these are ranches people created, and they're letting the public know they exist. When you create your ranch, if you want to keep it private, you just don't check public. So here you can just see an example of that. All these are ranches that are in public, and some of them, the user or the person who set it up said you can request access to it if you want to. So I'll go back to my ranches here. And looking at the UCCE ranch, you'll see a list of all the plantings that are active here when you do that. And so, for example, I have almond, a cabbage example, celery, lettuce, strawberry example. So that's the name of the planting. There's the commodity type. And then we show the start date. For almond, that might be the leaf out date for the year, or the first water for cabbage, and the end date of the crop, and then the planting area. So this would be the field that that planting is in. So you can search these by planting area. You can search by commodity, or again by the name. You can hit active plantings here. And favorite plantings are the ones you designate with a star. And then you have all plantings. So this would be for all the years. And so I can go back, to last year and pull up a planting and look at the information that we entered for the last year. And you'll see this button here that's add new plantings. And then for each ranch, you will have a gear if you have access to the ranch settings. So I think most of the participants would not have access to the gear here, but when you create your ranch, you'll see that. So that's where we go to the ranch settings, or if you want to export all the information from that ranch, you use this export function here. So let's look at one example here. So here's cabbage, and if you click on this, you'll see what we call the planting card, which shows you again the start and end date of that crop, and it shows events that are planned or upcoming. So we have a drip irrigation planned for today, 4.7 hours. We have a fertilization event, 6.7 gallons per acre planned. Now, the reason we have this set up as a card is because if we have a small screen, like on a phone, then it's easy to view that way. So if I make this go away, see there's my list of plantings. Okay, so going back to that, we also have a tab for past events. So here you see all irrigation and fertilization events here. This icon means this is a water event that was brought in by a flow meter. We also have planting settings. So we'll learn about how to adjust those settings. If you make adjustments, you may need to recalculate that planting to get updates on your recommendations. And then another sort of a new feature we've added is duplicate that planting. So It's typical medium to large lettuce operation in the Salinas Valley would have many, many fields of lettuce. And so if one field's pretty much set up similar to another, you can use this duplicate planting and then make some adjustments based on that specific planting. You'll also see to the right here what's called charts. And if you have flow meter data, you'll have this option to view flow meter data. But you have rainfall data, so you can review that. ET data, and I mentioned that you could enter in your own ET information, or if you think there's something wrong with SINUS, you can make an adjustment. So just show you briefly that. So it's showing you the reference ET from the most current date backwards in time and where that data is coming from. And then it shows you for each of the different weather stations that are designated for that ranch, you can see what each station is reporting for a reference ET. And it's similar for rainfall data. You can see what your values are that you're using, and for each of the different weather stations, what they're reporting. And I just did want to mention, if you were in a different region, you could change these values to, based on the ET data you're getting from your own weather station. Other charts we have is, this is another new one, is how much water is applied versus recommended by CropManage. So if you click on here, you're going to see the black is what's applied, blue is what's recommended. In this case, they're under irrigating compared to what CropManage is recommending. And we can add soil moisture sensors, and you can view those. And then the canopy curve, we'll talk more about that later, how to make adjustments on that. But that's to view CropManage's estimate of the fractional cover over time, which we use to create a crop coefficient. So let's see. That sort of shows you right on the card what you might have access to. And then you can view all the events sort of as a list, with totals at the bottom here. And you'll see these orange explanation marks, or this icon, if there's, say, an event entered, but it hasn't been followed up on in terms of was it completed. And then here's a summary in sort of a table form, where you can see all the events together based on date. You can look at it, just the water events, or fertilizer, or soil sample, or tissue sample events. Then over here to the right is, if you're in the field, you want to add a new event, you just click on the plus sign, and that's where you would do it. Okay. So I'm just going to take a look and see if I covered most everything here. One other point I did want to make is, if you open up an event, you can see who was the last person to update that event. So here, in this case, it shows that I entered it yesterday at 6:15 p.m. And so this is a way to keep track of who's doing what on a ranch and entering information. Okay. So we are at the point where I think I'm going to hand it over to Andre, and he's going to share his screen. And this is the part where we're going to get into the hands-on part. So hopefully the boring stuff is behind us, and you'll engage by setting up your own ranch, and then I'll come back and show you how to set up plantings.
Okay, thank you. So I'll go ahead and share my screen here. Let me see, hopefully I'll be able to. Okay, looks like I'm sharing my screen now. And well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Andre Biscaro, and I work for the University of California Cooperative Extension Office in Ventura County. I'd like to thank you for attending this webinar, and I'll be walking you, I'll be guiding you through the steps for setting up a ranch. So each of you participants could create your own ranch while you follow what I'll be doing here, okay? So basically, those are my favorite ranches that I have worked recently, and I still store data there. You can see there's no active planting there, but those are the ranches I used in the past. So when I log into CropManage, this is the view I have, so I can select the ranch I want to work. But right now, we'll be creating a ranch. So here on the top, let me see. Okay, I'm having confusion here with my second screen, but so we see the creating ranch button here on the top right. So let's click on that, and then we'll name the ranch. So let's just say this would be the Hueneme Ranch, and we have, let's just say 200 acres there. And for the coordinates, we can either put the coordinates in here, or we can zoom in, and I'll just find a Ventura here. And I'll just pick one field in here. So this is, it populates with the coordinates. And the nice thing in here is this feature where you can allow people to actually see this range. So in case if somebody wants to, it's searching for a specific ranch, and say, hey, you know, you want to follow these recommendations, or somebody, mostly people in the same farm who'd like to see the recommendations or participate in the process of creating the recommendations, or yeah. So this button here will allow people to find the ranch you create. I'm sorry, I just got a message here on my screen, but I'll go ahead and create the ranch. So with creating a ranch now, I have all these possibilities in here. I can add a ranch member, planting area, fertilizers, weather stations, water source, and commodities. So let's start with the ranch members. So let's just say I want Emilio Quesada to be part of my ranch. So I'll just type in here Emilio, and I find his name. And then I have options for what Emilio can do in the ranch. For example, he can only view or have no access or edit the ranch. So I'll just say Emilio can edit the ranch, he can edit the plantings, and I'll just go ahead and give full permission so he can create recommendations for irrigation, fertilizations. He can add soil samples as well. And then I'll go ahead and add Emilio. So in case I want to add somebody else, I'll just click in there. It's pretty straightforward. Now for adding a planting area, let's just say I want to add a planting area, and the planting area name would be, I'll just call that rice, and change not say, well, just keep editing. So let's just the size, that would be, let's just say 20 acres. Again, I can paste the coordinate, or I can zoom in the ranch and select a spot on that ranch. It populates with the coordinates. And now we have in here the soil type, as Michael mentioned. It brings up the, I'll just click on click editing. So it keeps the, brings up the data from the UC Davis soil web, which actually captures the data from the NRCS or the Sorgo database. And then you can also choose the CropManage certified data, which I believe is mostly relevant to Michael's region, to Monterey County, since I don't believe they've done any sort of data verification in Ventura. So I'll just choose the UC Davis soil web data. So that's a Winimi Sandalone soil. And in here we have the option of, for example, if for that field I have a soil physical analysis, or actually another analysis that I have organic matter content, I can change that here. In your organic matter content, we change in the mineralization rate of your field, and then you have the percent silt in sand, and that really helps with or affect the recommendations, because, for example, you want to convert ppms of nitrate to pounds of nitrate. So we need to get an idea of what the volume and mass or the density of the soil is. So we use this information along with soil bulk density. So yeah, you can go ahead and insert your data here if you have your own information. And also if you have root depth obstruction, which is, relatively common in Ventura County, you can insert there. I'll just go ahead and go with this. Because I wonder if I'm missing something here. I have the range. Okay. I'll just add that planting area. And now let's add fertilizers. So there are basically two options for adding fertilizers. You can choose a fertilizer from a list. Let's just say CN9, and you see the CN9 here. You can click on that and add this fertilizer. Only thing is when you add a fertilizer, you really want to make sure that the information here is correct. I don't believe there's a way for Michael or the other people to keep verifying every fertilizer that's added in here, because this is added by people like you and I, and a user can add the fertilizer, and I'll show you in the next step. But I know that's the density of CN9, and I know it has 9% of nitrogen, so I'll just go ahead and add that fertilizer. But I also want to add CAN17, so instead of searching for it, I'll just type in here CAN17, and then I know it's a liquid fertilizer. What's that? 12.64 for the density. How many pounds per gallon? That's really important. That will convert that and the percent nitrogen, which is 17 for CAN17, will be used to convert the recommendation. Let's say CropManage makes a recommendation of 10 pounds of nitrogen per acre. So that helps with converting pounds of nitrogen to gallons of CAN17. So I'm pretty much interested in nitrogen, so I'll just populate nitrogen in here, and I'll add that one to the list. So I have both CAN17 and CN9 as my fertilizers, and I can just keep adding any fertilizer there. Now we'll go ahead and add a weather station from Siemens. So what CropManage does, it searches for the close by or nearby stations based on the location of the ranch. So we've seen station 156 in Oxnard, 152 in Camarillo, and 198 in Santa Paula. Station 156 is no longer active. It's been vandalized a few years ago, but I know this is something that Michael will be working on in the nearby near future. So I just want to make sure that when you add a station, please visit the Siemens website, and this is the address here. You can click on stations, and clicking stations, you see the station ID number. That's the same ID you see in here, 156, 198, and 152. Then you see the name of the station, it's usually the location, and the status. So we do have a good amount of inactive stations, so let's just go and find station 156. That would be the one I'll be choosing. Let me get this thing out of the way. So I'll be choosing this station here, 156, but since I came to Siemens website and I know that station is inactive, I'll just go ahead and use station 152 in Camarillo. So I'll select that station. Now we also have the option of selecting the spatial scenes. So go ahead and click on that added option here, and it pops up this window where we can get the weather station from a weather station or the spatial mode. So the spatial mode will help account for variability in weather when you don't have too many similar stations close by. So that could be an option for Ventura County. We do have a lot of fog, especially in the morning towards the coast. And our closest station, for example, to this field we're setting up is in Camarillo. So there can be a good difference in weather between the coast and Camarillo. So I'll just select the spatial mode that uses the solar radiation from the location where the zip code or where the ranch is set up, and use all the information from the closest station. That would be the Camarillo station. And in here you have sequential mode, so it can get rainfall data from the first active weather station in the list, or you can do the average mode in case you're, for example, right in the middle of 3 or 4 stations. You can always select that average mode. In this case, I'll use sequential mode and save it. And then the next step here is to select or add a well. Let's just say this well name here is we're going to add the electrical conductivity. So let's just say it's a good water quality that has a fairly decent amount of nitrogen in the water. So the nitrogen in the water will help with estimating how much nitrogen is added to your field with every inch of water applied to that crop. So I'll go ahead and add that water. I can always add more than one well. And then this is where you select a commodity. So clicking in commodity, you see there are over 15 commodities, and Michael and his cooperators keep adding commodities in here. So we did add strawberries and celery to Ventura County. At this point, we only have main season strawberries and celery, but we'll be soon adding summer planted strawberries and other vegetable crops as well. So we're going to choose this last option here, strawberry proprietary, that also works for the public UC cultivars. This is something that also Michael will be working on to modify a little bit this in here, but this will work on 64-inch bed for Oxnard as well. And there's a place we can change that, and I believe Michael is going to cover that next. So I'll just go ahead and add another field, and that's a salary. Save here, and I'll go ahead and actually add Michael in case he wants to follow with this branch, or just switch to the UCC branch. Michael, I'm giving full permission to Michael as well. All right, so now we'll pass it to Michael, and he will be helping you guys to set up a new planting.
Okay, I can go. This will be interesting to show you. Andre asked, he added me to his ranch he just created, and let's see if I can find it there. Sometimes you have to reload your browser to see all the plantings. So I think this began with an H, if I recall. I have so many ranches. Oh, there it is. Sorry. So here's the button. There's no plantings, and at this point, everyone should be, should have created a ranch with Andre. If anyone hasn't, just let us know, I guess, through the chat. But you could also create, if you want, a planting in that UCCE ranch if you weren't following along and you just want to start doing it right away. Go ahead and use that UCCE ranch. I'm using the one Andre gave me access to. So here, I just can click this plus, or if you already have plantings, you would go over to the far right upper right hand corner and hit that. So I'm going to create a celery planting. So this would be celery, Ventura, or Oxnard. Then I select the commodity. And if there was different versions of celery, you would select the type of crop. Then the start date, we often refer to wet date on the coast here with our vegetables, because that's the first date of the first irrigation. And CropManage will automatically, for some of these commodities, automatically put in a estimated harvest or end of crop date. And then you need to select a field. This one's called rice. So Andre set that up in the ranch originally, and so that's the nice thing, is once you have your field all set up, you can use it over and over with all your different plantings. Now sometimes we split the fields into several different plantings with vegetables. So I could click here and zoom in right to that field and get exactly where the planting is. Maybe it's on this side here. So it can be different, sort of the center of that planting compared to where the field is. Because sometimes in vegetables, we have maybe a 5-acre planting in a 20-acre field. Okay, and that's useful, not necessarily for the ET information, but I'll talk later about how CropManage can pull in satellite images of fractional cover. And we've interfaced CropManage with a product called SIMS, and that was developed by NASA. So that's why we'd want to know exactly where that crop is. So then we go to irrigation settings, and remember, it's important to give an accurate recommendation in terms of time to know the application rate of the system. So you may not know the application rate of your drip system, right? So we have a little calculator you'll see here. See here. So I could put in the bed width and say this is 40-inch beds, and there's one drip line. And if I know the tape discharge rate, maybe it's sort of a low flow rate, I could calculate what the application rate is. So this is in inches per hour. And also I should mention, our units are in English units. I know there's some people that want things in metric. So that's something that we did note, or I noted, and maybe in the future we'll add that as a feature where you can select metric versus English units. So for each of your irrigation methods, you would need to know the application rate. Here's the sprinkler system. We do have a calculator for a limited number of sprinkler heads. And we plan to add more on that, but you do your nozzle size, pressure, and the spacing of those heads. And then you would calculate sort of what your application rate might be. If you have a measurement of this and the flow meters, if you use those, they'll give you a sense of what your application rate is too. Then we put in a uniformity factor in this. So this is a sort of an estimate. We have 75% uniformity. For germination, you'll see we have a lower uniformity because we have a lower tolerance for having dry spots in that field during the germination phase. So we lower that number, and that can be also adjusted. Any of these numbers here, you can make adjustments. We give default numbers, but those are just guides, so you have something to start with. So maybe that's 85%. We could put a leaching requirement to add a little extra water to leach out salts. And I think Andre said they have good water quality, so we'll just leave that at 0. But if it was, say, fairly salty water, we might increase that to 10 or 15%. If for those of you who are interested in flow meters and adding that, that would be a little more advanced than this class. But what you would do is your flow meter would be interfaced with a data logger. The data logger would be connected to the internet, and the file from that data logger would be stored somewhere. And so you would put the directory, sort of the IP address and directory of that file and file name in here, and give information about how much you're monitoring in that field. Maybe it's only 2 acres out of that 5 acres that you're monitoring. So that's all the irrigation information. Okay, soil information. So as much like what Andre was talking about, CropManage will pull in the soil web information. But for the planting, like if that planting is a different area of the field, you may want to adjust these numbers. And I just want to reiterate, the way we're using the soil information is to figure out an estimate of water holding capacity, how much water is stored in the soil, so that we can also let you know, what would be an appropriate frequency to irrigate based on the ET demand and what your water holding capacity is. And then we have a root depth model. And so texture information is very important. Also getting the soil bulk density right. Now these values that come from NRCS might be a little high. We've noticed that over time. And so, you could have bulk density assessed for your field to see if it makes sense. But that's a pretty important factor because it affects the porosity of the soil. So those are your soil settings. And then crop settings. We've, over the years, have sampled lots and lots of celery fields and have a sense of the nitrogen uptake of celery. And so we put that in here, but you can adjust this. So if you think your celery crop's going to take up more than 250 pounds of N, you can make that higher, or you can make it lower. So that's one thing that could be adjusted. And you'll see as you go through here, these little eyes, which try to explain what each of these factors are. So here you see cumulative N uptake of the crop during the whole season. Maximum N recommendation. So again, it's a default value you can change, but if you plan, you're never going to put more than, say, 50 pounds on in one application. You don't want CropManage to recommend that more than 50. You just limit it to 50. Previous crop residues for that planting is something you might add. You had a cauliflower crop, because that would provide some nitrogen to your current crop. But you need to mention, how long has it been since you incorporated those residues? Maybe it was 2 weeks ago. Something else is the maximum canopy size. Again, we have a default value based on measurements we've done in the field. So if you're happy with all those inputs, then you would just add it. And then you see what it will do is start pulling in ET data. Of course, we just started on 7/15, so it won't be a lot of data for it to pull in. But this might take a minute or two. We noticed, when you're pulling ET data from CIMIS, and that's where it's getting from, if you select spatial CIMIS, it really will slow it down a bit more compared to a particular weather station. So that's an example of how you would set it up for celery. Let's see if it will finish up here. So maybe while that's going, I can go to another ranch, and I want to show you just an example with a tree crop, because I know there's some people that have joined the workshop that are involved with tree crops. And so let's see if I can get that going here. So I'm going to just discard it for now and go to the UCCE ranch. I just want to show some of the differences when we're talking about a tree crop. And I see some people have created some of their own crops here. So here's almond, and we go to this little gear here. That's the planting settings. So one of the differences here is you have to put the age of the crop in there. You have the option to put in the yield, the actual yield. And then in crop settings, you're going to see something more complicated. There's a nitrogen recommendation model that UC Davis's Patrick Brown developed that's incorporated into CropManage. So here we put in a yield estimate, you know, so maybe 3,500 kernels. And then when you take your spring leaf sample, you'd put in some values, you know, so maybe the tissue sample would be something like this. And this is based again on Patrick Brown's model. And so this would give a predicted summer end leaf value. If this was low, then it might adjust the seasonal end requirement versus something, you know, a little high. And this adjusts your N uptake curve based on this information. And you can put in manure credits, compost credits, and winter cover crop credits using these calculators. So that's another difference, I would say. And so here's where you would put in information about any cover crops that you have. And then there's onset of leaf senescence. You can change that date. Another difference is in irrigation settings. We included micro sprinklers here. So we have a calculator for that, where you put in your tree spacing and micro sprinklers, and we have a calculator to calculate your application rate. So that's another difference. For strawberry, I have a strawberry example here. One difference that you will see is in crop settings, you have a little calculator that helps you figure out what the crops and uptake is. And that's based on what you think the yield will be. So if you say, well, I think I'll have, you know, 80,000 pounds an acre by the end of the season cumulatively, it will calculate what the seasonal total and uptake of that crop might be. And so that's a bit different than the vegetable crops. Okay, so let me make sure I covered everything. Yeah, so one of the most important things is that after you go through all these different settings is to hit save if you want to save anything. If you're making changes, again, it will ask you if you want to recalculate things. So but if you don't think that change is significant, just skip that. Good. So I guess we have gotten to the point in the seminar or webinar where we can answer some questions. Then we'll have a poll with just some questions to see if you understand what we've been presenting. And then we would have a break that would start again at 2:50. But maybe we could take some time and answer some questions that you might have before we get going.
Yeah, so there have been some Q&A questions. Michael has already answered in text to some of them. So if you put a question in there, please go ahead and check that. We do have one that hasn't been answered yet here. How do we find tape discharge rate?
Oh, okay, tape discharge rate. So that is, we use sort of the old definition, which is gallons per minute per 100 feet of length of tape. There is a new way that manufacturers are talking about tape discharge rate, and that might be liters per, I think liters per hour, and per emitter, and then you need to know the spacing of the emitters to calculate it. And right now we only have that one option, so you'd have to convert it over. But it's basically for any unit length of tape, how many gallons a minute are discharged. And so we use 100 feet of tape as that sort of unit of tape. That has been sort of traditionally how it's been in California until recently, where they switched over to sort of a symmetric way of doing it.
Okay, another question is, does this platform support polyculture plantings?
So you're talking about multiple plantings, or mixed plantings, I guess, where you have like lettuce and I don't know, something else growing, or sometimes you have maize and maybe some peppers or something growing in there. So you would have to designate each one as a separate planting. We don't really have a way to sort of mix multiple commodities together into the same planting.
Okay, another question is, how do you add ranch members not on the list?
Yeah, so you would ask them to create a CropManage account. That's the only way we can add them. If they're listed, then you can add them. So it's free to set up an account, and then that allows them to view, the ranches that you add them to.
Okay, another question is, can we use CropManage for commodities not listed in the software?
Well, it's difficult to use it that way. I mean, you can. You just call that, the commodity that's closest to what you're growing, that the same, say you want to grow, was it moringa? But we don't have moringa. So the question is it close to another commodity that you could sort of adopt? If that's a perennial crop, maybe you could use a perennial crop that's already in CropManage as a model and make adjustments to those parameters. But we might need some information, and you could talk to me about, how to do that. Before we add a new commodity to CropManage, we'd like to really have a researcher making measurements, on canopy development and uptake, so we have the right information that we're putting in.
Okay, and here's a question. How can I import the data from an external weather station? Which format should I use?
Yeah, so if you want to automate this, to pull in data from your own weather station, or there is a way, but we use something called an API to do this, and so that's a whole different little website within CropManage, and there's some coding, so you would need to do this automatically. You would have to have somebody make that, I guess, hands shake between CropManage and your weather station. And a lot of the weather data now ends up on a sort of a web service. So I know, for example, like Hobo has that option, or Meter has that option. So the data from the data logger goes right in to their website. And so then we'd have to pull it off of their website to do that. Now with Hobo, we already did that once. So for Hobo weather stations, it's possible to do something like that. For other manufacturers, we'd have to work with them to do that. And so usually we ask, that they pay for that programming time to get it done.
Okay, and then we have a question here. If time permits, would you run through the calculations used to determine on-flow rate from the flow rate of tape? Use one line on 40-inch beds.
Yeah, I mean, I think we can see if we have time to do this. I know Eric, and so we could also talk by phone if there isn't time to do that. But I think your question is, okay, you got one drip line on a 40-inch bed. How did you end up with 0.09 inches per hour from that? And so you probably don't have the time to go through all those calculations. CropManage does that automatically for you, and we're sure it's accurate. But I could show you, you know, the calculations.
So follow up on that polyculture planting question. The example is lettuce takes up half an acre and tomato takes up half an acre in a 1 acre total ranch. Do we keep setting the acre setting to 1 or to 0.5?
Yeah, so I think you would just do the 0.5. It's not going to affect CropManage. It doesn't really worry about, you know, the total acres. That's for your own reference to keep track of. But it won't affect the recommendations because we give everything on a per acre basis. However, if you're trying to manage tomatoes mixed with, say, lettuce, that will be a little trickier because, you know, the recommendation for tomato will be different than for lettuce. So, very good. Clint, did you want to put up the poll? And then we can take a break for a few minutes and come back at what, 2:50 Pacific time. So we will be back at 2:50, and then what we'll do is we're going to learn how to add a soil sample or fertilizer or irrigation event to our plantings. Sound good? I thought I would just go over the poll. Looks like many people participated. And these two questions were just to see if you understood the terms we're using in CropManage, because that has been sort of a hang up for some users, getting confused about all these terms. And so the first question was, which of the following could be a planting area in CropManage? A crop, only a few responded affirmative. A field, yeah, that could be. But we also use the term block in our area. And so it would be B and C, which most people got right. And maybe you never heard of the term block, so then you'd be at a disadvantage there. The second question is also related to terms, or just the format, what you would see when you open up a ranch and you see a list of plantings. That would be the correct answer. And then within the planting, you would see what type of fields, which fields those plantings are. You will not see a list of events until you click on one of the plantings. So we'll have another poll of questions later at the next break. So at this point, I'm going to hand it over to Andre, who, if you want to follow along, he's going to show how to add a soil sample event in one of our cabbage plantings here.
All right, so let me go ahead and start the video here. So this is the fun this is the fun part of CropManage, and I mean that because it does take a little bit of a time and attention to actually mostly learn how to set up your ranch and the plantings, setting up the details of the crops. So you understand if you find that a little, it's not difficult, but it does take a little time. But you only do that once. You only set up your ranch once. You only set up that planting one time, and after that you'll be adding events, and that's what Michael and I will be walking through in the next steps. So to create a recommendation, CropManage uses models for nitrogen uptake, as Michael mentioned, and also CropManage uses information of how much nitrogen that field actually has in the soil. So, we'll be using the UCCE ranch now. So I want to ask everybody to follow that, but do not enter any value unless Michael asks you to enter that. So I'll be coming here and click on UCCE ranch. And within UCCE ranch, I see the cabbage example here. So I'm going to click on that one. And then this window pops up here, and I believe Michael already walked you through these steps in here. But this is when you add an event. This is where you add an event. So let's click in here, and at this time we'll be adding a soil sample. So we'll be clicking on that, and let's just say we took a soil sample today, and then the type of the sample is the quick nitrate test. You can also have a lab test there. I'll be showing how to insert the data for the lab test as well. But I'll go ahead and click here on the quick nitrate test. The sample is taken today. We already processed the sample. The sample is there in the fridge, waiting until the solution on top is clear. We go take the value. We're selecting here that was a 0 to 12 inch depth. And the crop stage in here, you find a huge variety of crop stage names. Let's just say this is the 4th drip irrigation. Just so you know, this is for your records. The crop stage will not be used, will not influence the calculation of the nitrogen recommendation based on the sample value here. And then here you basically tell if the soil moisture of the sample, what type of soil moisture you have. In this case, I have a moist sample, and we have a value in the quick test of, let's just say, 40 ppms. So we add that, and then we are also going to add another soil sample, but this time, let's just say I sent a sample to the lab last week, and I'm going to say, okay, this is another 0 to 12 inch depth sample. The crop stage, again, it's not that relevant. I'll just put in here, this is for the 4th drip irrigation. And the nitrate, nitrogen, just like here, let's just say that sample is 10 ppms. Please note that this is nitrate, nitrogen. Some labs will report nitrate as just a nitrate, so you have to do the conversion. And then you can add the phosphorus value, potassium, and this is mostly for your records, and Michael can correct me that this is mostly to keep track of the fertility, overall fertility of your fields, but at this point for CropManage will not make recommendations of phosphorus, potassium, or any other nutrients. So you can type everything in here, and then click on add, and then you added that those 2 soil samples. To see those values, let me just go back in here. You see those two options in here. I clicked on the first one, excuse me, and then you click on soil sample, and you see in chronological order the samples that have been added. And you see that today we do have a few people who added some samples in here too. So with that, I'll hand it over to Michael to add a fertilization event.
So we have the cabbage example. And one thing I want to show, when an event is completed, it will be in the past. So see, nobody listened to Andre, and everyone put in a sample. That's why there's so many here. Like this one, I can click on there and see Patrick put this one in. So, which is fine. A lot of replication there to see what the soil nitrate is. And it's amazing that everyone got the same value. So now, say we want to do a fertilizer recommendation. Again, I'll do it, and you can do one, but do this maybe after I do it. So I'll do it for tomorrow on the 16th. Well, we'll do it today. So so I choose from the fertilizer list which fertilizer I want to use. I'll use UAN 32. And then a very important piece of information is CropManage is figuring out the end demand of the crop over an interval. So you need to tell it what that interval is. There's a default value of 30 days, but we know we probably would fertilize every maybe 10 days for cabbage. And so I put 10 days in there. Again, I could choose to, for my own notation, to put in that this is the 4th drip fertigation, and I add it. Now, right away, you see CropManage gave a recommendation here. And so it said 6.7 gallons per acre. You can view that in pounds then per acre if you want to see that. But then you might want to know, well, how did it come up with that recommendation? So we do have this recommendation summary. And so you see the future uptake in this 10 days is about 29 pounds of N, and that's based on our uptake curve. We're not taking soil into account yet. And then there is some estimate of mineralization over those 10 days, and then it shows you the math there. Now we can further refine this recommendation by using one of our soil samples. So we could use this one on 7/15 today. And based on that, now it's saying, hey, you don't need to add, any fertilizer here. So it shows you how it made that adjustment. There's more at this stage of the crop. You only need maybe 13 parts per million in the soil, and you're far above that. So it's really saying that there's a sufficient supply of nitrogen for the stage of the crop that you're in to probably skip fertilizing. This crop will be harvested in a few weeks, so it's getting fairly mature at this stage. And so you don't need quite as much N in the soil. But if I used a different soil sample, it would actually up that nitrogen rate because the soil is getting a little low. We could add in some estimate of nitrogen contribution from our irrigation water. So you can click on that and you see you can enter your own value manually, or we have information about the well, and you can blend the wells. So if I want to do 75% of this water source, 25% of this, it figures out sort of your average N concentration. And then CropManage will automatically estimate over those 10 days how much water you would put on based on crop ET, and it shows you, you know, where it came up with that recommendation. And so you do have the option, if you know you're going to put more water on or less, you can change that value. But it's basically saying over the next 10 days, just the water is going to contribute about 11 pounds of N per acre, or in terms of gallons of fertilizer, you could look at it that way. So that would be about 3.2 gallons of fertilizer per acre. So then you can update the recommendation. And now it's saying you only need about 8 gallons per acre. So you have a lot of options of how you can use CropManage to make recommendations. You can just do it on uptake of the crop, on the uptake curve. You can, in addition, if you have a soil sample, utilize that. And you can add in water. Now, it's very hard to put on 7.87 gallons per acre for many growers. They have to round it either the nearest 5 gallons or 10 gallons. So the manager may put in 10 gallons here and then save it. Okay, and so if we go under upcoming events, you see this is the one that I added. It looks like somebody else put in this. So Jay put his in. And Geraldo, he put in his. That's good. And so these are upcoming events. So now, Andre, you're there, right? If you would, I want you to go.
Yeah, I'm here.
Yeah, so what I would like you to do is open, these are upcoming events, but take this top one, 10 gallons per acre. That's my recommendation. And update it with what say you're going out in the field and you're actually putting the fertilizer on and you want to confirm that it was applied. If you could just update it with what you really applied, then we can reload our screens and we'll see the update. Can you do that?
Sure. So I'll go ahead and I didn't have the full amount for 10 gallons per acre, but oh, it changed here. Okay, just saved.
Okay, let's see. All right, so you see that a lot of these events disappeared, and we go into past. Looks like one of these somebody updated. Which one did you do, Andre? 10 or 8?
The second one, just under drip.
Oh, okay. And so, so here I'm the manager. I said to do 10, but Andre went out in the field. He didn't have enough fertilizer, so he just put 8 on. But he let me know, so I can see that, and I see when he updated it. So there it is. Now I saved it, and if I open it again, I think it. Oh, somebody else changed it there, but Geraldo did it. So the main point is, you see who was the last person to save it, and once it's completed, it goes into the past tab here. So, for example, this one hasn't been completed. That I can see who added that one. That was Alejandra. I'll put that one in, and it hasn't been completed yet. When it is, then it would go in the past. Now, obviously, you wouldn't have this many fertilizer events for planting or this many soil samples. We're just practicing here. Okay. So next, I mean, we fertilized our crop, but we're going to fertigate the crop, so we need to know how much water we're really going to apply. Let's see. Why don't Andre, maybe let's use the celery as an example for that one. Yeah, let's see. Yeah, use the celery and see what it does. So I'll stop sharing my screen so you can take over, okay?
Okay, go ahead and change it here. So let's go ahead and click on the celery example. And then we have celery from May into August. So we're going to add a irrigation event in here. And same place in here where we added the soil sample or fertilizer, we're going to add the irrigation event. So pretty straightforward. And you said that's coming up tomorrow, right, Mike?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so we had the recommendation for tomorrow, and we'll be drip applying this. We'll click and calculate, see how quickly it did. It shows the recommended hours of irrigation, so 13.8. I believe we have a low flow tape, right, Mike? So that must be the reason why we have such a long irrigation. This must be maybe 1.4 inch of recommendation. So we can click in here to see in inches. So in this case, we see 1.38 inches. So it's 1/10 of the hours because of the application rate is 0.1. So let's just say I actually want to recommend 14 hours. And I click in here, and I can create that. So before I create that, I'd like to check on this recommendation just to make sure that the recommendation is sound. We're looking in here at the recommendation summary. So the average ET is 0.21 inches a day, and we can take a look in here. Those are all the dates since the last irrigation and all the ET since then. We can tell this number here is a little different, and we can see it is an average from historical data. I believe that's historical data, right, Michael? That CropManage uses for a day that a future day or a present day that we still don't have the ETO value from Cindy Station. So yeah, we confirm that. If you give the recommendation for today, you'll be calculating the 14, 13, the 12, 11, and 10. So CropManage is averaging all the ETO data. That's at 0.21 inches a day. And then the average crop coefficient is 1. Distribution uniformity, that's whatever was set up in for that field with the planting. Those are the days since the last irrigation. Leaching requirement or fraction is 0. So there was no rainfall during the last 6 days. So in here, CropManage shows a little formula. The total ET is the average ET times the crop coefficient and the days since the last irrigation. And it shows a formula in here. Everything looks good to me. I'll just go ahead and click on create that recommendation. Let's just take a look in here. So let's go to this bigger window in here and click on water. And we see in chronological order all the recommendations that are created. And this is the recommendation we Jay Subramani. I thought I did that one.
We sometimes, Andre, sometimes we have trouble or multiple people are you doing something at the same time, and it will
Right.
associate the wrong name with the event. So don't worry too much about that.
I'll go ahead and refresh that and see.
And I would suggest you show it in the table form because there's more information you can see there, such as the irrigation interval, recommended interval.
Right. There's one in here, right, Mike?
Yeah. So
this is the irrigation interval, and here right beside it is the recommended maximum irrigation interval. So this again was calculated based on the soil physical parameters you use to set up the field, the root depth, and the sensitivity of that crop, right, Michael, to water stress.
Yeah. And I think a good point is that the interval that the grower chose was 6 days. What CropManage says is you really should go more frequent based on that soil water holding capacity.
So what else we have in here? We have the applied water. So we have contribution or contributing rainfall. In this case, it's 0. We can also click in here in the bottom. This shows the totals on top. And the 0.1 in here that's added to the 18.6, it should be a rainfall. Let's just go ahead and click on that. See all the rainfall data from all these stations in here. It seems like this branch is using the sequential mode, Mike. So it shows all these other stations. So I'm going to just.
I think the rain event was in May, so you'd have to go back to see that.
Go back, yeah. But I'm mostly interested for this recommendation in here. And the nice thing of CropManage is if you don't feel comfortable with a certain rainfall data from the station, you can always come here and add your own. I'll just click on. I'll just let me see here. Sure why it's not saving, but maybe because there's more people using the same planting. Just go ahead and close it for now and discard that. And the other thing I believe Mike wants to show is the flow meter information. I believe this should be set up with a flow meter. And he shows all the irrigation dates and the flow rate. This is quite neat. He shows the start time, the end time, the average flow rate in gallons per minute, total amount of gallons applied, time, the water in inches. That's the information I'll be mostly interested in, is how many inches of water was applied, and I compare that to my irrigation, or to my recommendation. That's quite neat. We don't have that yet for the for today's recommendation because that's going to happen tomorrow, and the data is coming from a flow meter that's connected with to a data logger and a cell phone modem that sends the data to CropManage. So just go ahead, close this, and and head it over to Mike.
What I'd like to also just go over is some of the issues that you might find when you use the recommendations. What are typical sort of mistakes a user might make? And I know this by experience because I've made plenty of mistakes in using this software. One of them is if you look at, say, this fertilizer recommend event here, they didn't put in maybe the correct days to the next fertilization, and so luckily we're close to the end of the crop, so it's not going to over-recommend it. But if you were earlier on the crop, it would probably tell you to put a lot of fertilizer on because you just use the default value of 30 days, and probably you're, with a cabbage crop, you're fertilizing like maybe every 2 weeks or every 10 days. So if you get that wrong, you're going to have a strange recommendation. So I do suggest you go to the recommendation summary, like Andre was showing you, so that you can see how it's coming up with the uptake. So you see, 30 days, that's too long. So that would be one of the issues. Sometimes, you hastily create a planting, and you might have the wrong start or end date. Maybe you get the wrong year. I've done that. And so things don't make sense because you're going way in the future or way in the past. There's another common mistake is you may, Andre will show you the list of fertilizers you may add to your ranch. Say it's a liquid fertilizer, and you quickly pick one of those and add it. But the user who entered that fertilizer on the list didn't put a density for that fertilizer. So now CropManage can't, figure out the pounds then, or assumes it's 0 for that fertilizer. So you'll get a recommendation that is very strange in terms of the gallons of fertilizer. Or they put the wrong value of the density or the percent in. So that's something to just double check if you get a strange recommendation. And then we do have in the planting settings sort of this maximum N recommendation. That's set too low. That will limit the maximum amount the CropManage will recommend. So if that is, say, 20 pounds, you're never going to get a recommendation above 20 pounds. So that's for fertilizer events. So those are the major things to look at. And then for irrigation, discard that. What are the types of issues there? Again, look at this recommendation summary, and if the ET looks strange, well, that could be an issue. You may have a strange crop coefficient. That can be related to having the wrong dates in for your crop. Maybe you say it's you put in the start May 1st, 2020, but accidentally put it end date of August 7th of 2021. Well, that just stretched out the crop cycle way past a year, and that will give you definitely a faulty recommendation. So also the days since last irrigation should make sense. If it's 70 days, you may have missed an irrigation. And what CropManage is doing is it figures out the amount of water to apply since your last irrigation. So if you don't enter a previous irrigation, it will go all the way to the beginning of the crop, which actually doesn't make sense. So if you come in the middle of your, planting your crop cycle, and you're asking CropManage how much to water, make sure you put in an event for irrigation that represents the last time the crop was irrigated. So you get an accurate estimate since the last irrigation of how much water to apply. So that's most of the other issues. Precipitation, make sure that's accurate. Again, that's why we have the recommendation summary. And also, you'll see right here in the summary where that ET information is coming from. So you see, oh, it's from Spatial CIMMYS, or it's CIMMYS Station 214. You see when it was last modified in the CropManage database. So 714 was the last time it pulled in this Spatial CIMMYS number. So that's just gives you a better sense of how to use this, and you sort of train yourself as you work with CropManage. So with that, I also wanted to show something else that can help fine-tune CropManage a little better. And let's see if I can do this with the cabbage example. You see in these charts, I mentioned canopy cover and the canopy curve. So what you'll see here is our model in blue of the CropManage canopy curve. Okay, sometimes that curve, this is just a generic model based on lots of measurements using that camera I showed in the beginning of the workshop. And then we use that data from many fields to come up with this curve. But your field could be different. And so you might need to adjust this. And so there's places here you can make adjustments. So like the maximum canopy, and you see these little eyes explain what each of these are in most cases. So you could change this to the max. Maybe it's only 80% canopy. So that would move it down. Now that's our theoretical curve. And then that curve is used to develop a crop coefficient. Now you'll see these little triangle symbols. And you may ask, what are those? Well, that is what I was talking about, the CIMMYS canopy. So if you designate your planting accurately in the field with the Latin long, what CropManage will do is go to this website called CIMMYS, the Satellite Irrigation Management System. And CIMMYS uses Landsat satellite photos and an algorithm that was developed by NASA. And they can estimate fractional cover. Sometimes it's very accurate, like here. It is quite accurate. There it looks very accurate. And sometimes it's off due to things like cloud cover. But you can sort of use that as a guide of what the fractional cover might be in your field. This is very useful, I think, for especially the orchard crops where you can't visually get up above the canopy, or you're under the canopy and you're not quite sure, what your maximum is. Well, you could go back a year, set up a planting, and see what the CIMMYS data indicates. And I have to say this product is free, and it's been getting more and more accurate, I think, over time. So, but again, buyer beware. If you have your own camera, or you can use your iPhone or a phone or regular phone, a smartphone, to take a picture of the canopy if it's a shorter crop like lettuce, there is an app called Canopeo that can use to sort of get an estimate of canopy. That camera, that method can be pretty accurate, but sometimes you do get errors just due to the color of the crop. Say sort of a purple cabbage like we have here, you may have a different value than it really is. Anyway, that allows you to make better adjustments, sort of an advanced feature, of CropManage. So, and then if you make any adjustments, then it can recalculate all your recommendations and do that math for you. So see where we are in time. Almost to the next break time, but before we do that, I wanted to go over, sort of a situation of how we envision CropManage being used. The idea is that this would be used by multiple people in the same farming operation. So you each would have, this unique login, so you know who's doing what in the software. And so if there's, say, a person that's assigned to taking soil samples, they would enter on the soil samples, and another person could go to that planting and then use that to make a fertilizer recommendation. And then a different person could take that fertilizer recommendation from the manager and then put that into practice, doing an applied amount of fertilizer and then just recording it under applied. I just want to emphasize until you put that, whether it's irrigation or fertilizer, under applied, it's not counted as part of the total. So it's really important to follow through. Otherwise, it's just not counted as the total. So I think we did illustrate that earlier, but you're still here, Andre, right?
Yeah, I'm still here, Mike.
Yeah. So so we have a drip irrigation. Well, I'll just erase this one. Delete it. So going back to, say, cabbage, I'll put in a new irrigation, maybe for today, and it's going to be drip, and I calculate it, and it says 4.5 hours, and I say, no, I want to put a little extra water in, so I'm going to save it here. Now it's in upcoming events. Now, Andre, you just, confirm, you're actually the guy out in the field turning the valve, so you're going to put the applied amount in terms of the number of hours you actually ran the system. And just tell me when it's completed, so just everyone can see that happening.
Okay, it's completed, Mike.
Okay, so then I refresh my screen. And now it's in past, and so Andre put on 6 hours, and there you see you completed it at 3 o'clock. So that just illustrates how we could use this on a farming operation. So with that, maybe we're headed for another break, and we're going to put up another poll. But I don't know if there's some time to answer 1 or 2 questions.
I think there is, Mike. Yeah.
Okay. So let's see if I can see any here.
Yeah, I'm going to launch the poll here in the background. You guys can fill it out now or during the break. We're going to answer some questions. So first one from the chat is there no furrow or surface irrigation options?
Good question. So we do have furrow for certain commodities. We didn't put it in, I think, for lettuce or for the vegetables yet. We have it for alfalfa. Um, one reason we haven't put a lot of, or what's holding it up, is that we wanted to have some sort of a calculator for furrow or for surface irrigation. And what we find is different regions get their water different ways. It's not like necessarily a pressure type of system with that we have with sprinklers and drip, where we turn a pump on in so many hours and a certain flow rate. With surface water, it's often a water order. And so what people are ordering is so many cubic feet per second for over a certain period of time. So we wanted to build into a calculator that would help people figure out their water orders, not just because if we just give you inches to be applied, that it's up to the user to figure out that water order. So we're sort of working that out. So right now in alfalfa, we do have furrow as an option, and it is just in inches at this point. I think we can add that to vegetables, but it would be as inches, and we wouldn't have a calculator yet. And then we could update that when we figure out sort of the best way to handle that calculator.
Okay, next question. If irrigation and fertilization recommendations want to be given at the same time, would one only use their fertilizer recommendation since it can contribute irrigation water, or do they have to be created separately?
I think what you mean is that you're taking the nitrate in the water into account, right? And so you need to know how much water is going to be applied. And that can be done separately, just under the fertilization event, because you have that option, it will calculate it. Of course, that's estimating how much water you're going to apply. You could also create an irrigation event, see what what's going to be recommended and what the manager recommends, and put that value into the fertilization event if you're taking nitrate in the water into account. Hopefully I answered that question correctly there.
Okay, and under crop max canopy, what defined area size is the percentage based on?
Oh, that's a good one. That's if, just like a bird would see the ground, it's all the ground, not just, the canopy covering, say, the bed top, but this includes the furrows, the space between plant rows. So it is literally the fraction of the ground area that's covered by canopy.
Okay, and last question here. Does this platform provide connection with other services such as enterprise resource planning software or private weather station data for automatic imports or exports of data collected?
Presently not. I mean, it's always a possibility to make these things happen, but we have limited funding, and we can only do this if someone pays for the funding, to make those connections, and which we have done in the past. We've had commodity boards that want to connect their users through another app to CropManage, and we built that in for them. So it's sort of an ad hoc basis as needed and as funding permits. We can do that, but we have very few of those options available right now. We do have export, so you can export anything into an Excel document, which I'll we'll show you, maybe after the break here. So any other questions?
That's all in the Q&A for now, unless anyone has any other questions they want to type in.
Okay, and I'll read these questions also and sometimes I can get better answers when I type them in. Try to do that during the break. And the idea is we would reconvene, and probably 3:40. Probably we could do that we have it at 3:45, how about 3:50? So in 10 minutes?
Okay, yeah, let's come back at 3:50. If you haven't filled out the poll that's up on your screen, please fill it out, and we'll come back with the answers to that and the rest of this webinar.
Sounds good. All right, see you then. Okay, so let me just go over these questions that we polled about before we get going. This first one, it seems like the group was pretty split whether the answer is true or false. So you saw that CropManage makes recommendations of amounts. So if you save it, the CropManage recommendation amount is saved. The farm manager can add to that, and then it's updated with the farm manager recommendation, and that is saved. But in terms of the total fertilizer applied, until you fill that box out that says applied amount, like say the farm manager recommended 10, you save it, that 10 wouldn't go into the total until someone actually put that 10 in the applied category. So the answer is true. Yeah, they are not included in the total applied, only the applied amounts are. That's just to show, that you can make recommendations, but until it's actually confirmed that it happened, it doesn't become part of the total. And then question 2, I think there was better consensus, and what things would you check if the irrigation recommendation doesn't make sense? And we went over these earlier. Getting the days since the last irrigation correct. That's very important. If you didn't put it in an earlier irrigation, it may have that really off. Or someone added an irrigation but didn't remove it, didn't ever really happen. That could get the days off. And then the application rate of the system, that's something else to check. The evapotranspiration or rainfall data, that would be something else. So all of those would be all of the above. So looks like that is quite clear. Yeah, be aware of the total that you definitely want, whether it's the total amount of water or total fertilizer, to be accurate. You have to put it in the applied category. Okay, so I would like to just go over a few things about, we discussed some of this about tuning plantings and recommendations. One of these is, let me just share my screen. There we go. Let's see. Something I guess we haven't done anything with strawberries here. But let's see, I'll put in just a quick fertilizer event for strawberries. And you'll see it's a little bit different. Typically, strawberries might be fertilized a number of times per month, at least in our region. So we'll use something like this product, and maybe you fertilize, you know, 3 times a month, and we add that in. It gives a recommendation here of, I don't know, showing that over a month it would take up about 41 pounds. The next 30 days, we use sort of this factor, fertilizer factor, that can be adjusted or affected by the soil sample. We don't have a soil sample here to do it. So the main point is, say we change something, we save this. Looks like other people are saving this. And maybe we change the fertilizations per month. So that might be, gives up a new recommendation there. But then I go into the planting settings here, and I might change something about the crop, such as the crop uptake. I say, oh, actually it's going to yield, it looks like it's going to yield higher this year. So I put it up to at 90,000 pounds per acre, right? And then I save it. And then this is where you might want to do a recalculation. So because you changed something in the planting setup. And let's see if it makes an adjustment here. Sometimes this takes longer if a lot of people are doing it at the same time on the same planting. So that could be what's going on here. Usually it goes pretty fast. Okay, there you see how it's updated to 6.5 because we changed the planting uptake. And see, do we have any past irrigations? Yeah, we do. So if I put in, something about, we put in a irrigation event that for today, well, say it's, today, and it's drip, and I calculate it. It says 2.27 hours. Create it. And I'm just refreshing my screen. So upcoming event there, 2.3 hours. But I go in here and charts. I change the canopy for, let's see what it does. And here you see the canopy curve, and I see, boy, this curve looks like it's a little less than what Sims is saying. So I might change, this is a value for when you get to what fraction of the crop cycle you get to the maximum canopy. So I put it a little lower, so it gets a little earlier to the maximum, and that fits, the SIMS data a little more accurately. So that might be something that I would change. I might change the maximum canopy maybe to 80%. So making those type of adjustments. And then it says, change the canopy settings, yes. And then again, you have this option to recalculate it. And should come up with an update in terms of the amount of water. But again, it takes sometimes a minute or two if there's a lot of irrigations in there to do all those calculations. But, so I opened it, and it didn't really change the recommendation in this case. But the other place you should remember is this button here for recalculate the planting. Okay. So that will help you make better adjustments in terms of your irrigation recommendations. You may also want to, customize your soil properties for the planting. I just want to make sure you understand where to do that. That would be again in your planting settings here. So in the soil settings here, something we didn't point out is for the deeper rooted crops, you may be a limit on how deep those roots can go. So in terms of estimating, how much, how frequent to irrigate, that's going to limit your water holding capacity or the effective rooting depth of that crop. And so you can put in a obstruction, at maybe it's at 3 feet because you have a hard pan at 3 feet. So you would add that in there. That would be important for, say, the tree crops. And again, these bulk densities look too high. That could be one reason. It might tell you to recommend water more frequently, to water more frequently, because if you have a higher bulk density, you have less porosity, and then you'd have to, irrigate more frequently because your soil has limited water holding capacity. So if I know it's more likely it's maybe 1.5 and 1.4, I would save this. And then, again, recalculate the recommendation. And we used to have the maximum interval CropManage recommends that you should go before irrigating right in the recommendation. But as Andre pointed out earlier, that would be, we'll close that. That would be in this table now. We felt it was a cleaner way to look at it. Again, here's the actual intervals, and let's see here. Oops, cancel it. And here's the recommended interval. So here's what's done and what was recommended. So generally every 2 days they're recommending to irrigate based on this soil type. Okay. This symbol here means something was not carried out in terms of applied, that there was an irrigation recommendation, but it wasn't under applied. And you see this NA, that would be this one here. So when I put in the actual amount, say it was 3 hours, that should go away. There it goes to 9.1 inches. So there is some way that CropManage lets you know that an irrigation or a fertilizer event was planned, but not necessarily carried out. Okay. I also wanted to show some soil moisture data. CropManage has that ability to take a look at soil moisture data. And again, just like with the flow meter, we have a way you can add a file to bring in tension data or volumetric data, or if you have salinity or EC sensors, you can put those in. And so it will graph it out. And it's a relatively simple format with many data loggers. You can program it so the file can be imported automatically into CropManage. I know a number of users are asking me how to get a weather station to bring its data in. What we can bring in very easily, I think, are soil moisture sensor data and flow meter data right now into CropManage if you follow a certain file format. And we'll probably be writing something in the help section of CropManage on how to do that. So, and you'll see here settings, and it will show you, here's the file, and then you link that file. So we put this file automatically from it's pulled from our data logger and put onto our server. We could pull it from your server. Essentially you set up your a computer to be open to the internet, and we put it as a secure site, and CropManage then will start pulling those files. As long as your file follows our format, which we'll outline for you, we can pull in your soil moisture sensor data. And it's the same for flow meters. We can pull in flow meter data if you follow that file format and you put that file on a server that's open. It has a specific IP address, and so you just put the IP address, you put the directory, and then the file name, like you would see here, and then it would come right in there. But that's basically how that works. And then I think I haven't talked much about exporting data. So for that, I want to go to a different ranch because this UCC ranch has a lot of data on it. Let's see if I can find a simpler one. Let's see. Thinking about this. Yeah, I'll just take one. Check ranch we were working on, but it's an example. You have export here, and we can export all the plantings. We can export by year. So each year there's a planting on there, or particular blocks. So that gives you sort of an option. So I might go with all. Let's see. I'll just go with this block. And then it will give you essentially a zip file. And there's information about the ranch, and then that block in particular would be there, and it can be opened up in Excel. Okay, so now you're in Excel, and so that's the ranch information, the different lots, wells, weather stations, fertilizers. Then we have a water summary. Shows all over the different years, I guess, how much water was applied. So this is very useful if you're exporting for in our region for the Water Quality Board, or the applied nitrogen summary here too, where it shows you the total amount applied for strawberries for that ranch. And then if you want to see for a particular block, let's see if I can, I think I have to share that screen again. So I'm going to, this is a different Excel file that would come out in the export. So now it's more particulars about that one planting. And so it shows the crop type and soil type. So yeah, here's all these soil test values in there. Soil samples, fertigations, all in there. Irrigations. You see the crop coefficients, all the particulars about this. So if you wanted to, export it and analyze the data, there it is. Here's the ET values that were used for that planting, rainfall data, and the flow meter information. There's no soil moisture data here, but if it was, it would be in this category here. Okay. So that's basically, what I was trying to show you in this last few minutes was some of these advanced features here. So at this point, I think we're at the point, I mean, unless Andre, you want to add something that you feel I missed, we were going to use yeah, go ahead.
No, I think you covered pretty well. Did you mention about the API? I think I see that on there.
Yes, the API. So several people asked, how do we mesh CropManage with other software? So I'm going to share my screen again. New screen. So we're back on the CropManage here, and what I have it open to is this other site called api.cropmanage.ucnr.edu. So what does API mean? Someone can correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is it's an application protocol interface. So this is how computers talk to computers through a different, a set protocol of language. And the API documentation shows how you can set up a piece of software to talk with CropManage. And we've done this successfully with some software applications. This is, questions on how do you get ET data in. Unfortunately, right now, because different weather stations have different formats, and the data could be in a file, it could be up on a website. So there would be some intermediate step where we would have to utilize the API to get that ET information into CropManage. So if you're computer savvy, I mean, this would be the site to go to learn about it. Our programmer, our software developer, he does give assistance, but if it's a lot of time, then we would need somehow to compensate him for his time. But he can make that handshake between CropManage and other software and help you do that with your software. So with that, anything else, Andre?
Not that I can think of. I think we can, open to questions and answer those.
Yeah. If there's any questions, we can try to take those and answer them.
Yeah, so there's a couple questions here. First is the one from chat. Is the maximum allowed depletion set internally by crop type?
Okay, very good question there. So I didn't show you some of these advanced settings. So there is, you're saying, okay, how do we figure out, how much moisture we can remove from the soil before we stress the crop? Where's the setting on that? So it would take strawberries. Is my screen showing still?
Yeah.
Yeah. So strawberries, for example, we go to planting settings. Move this out of the way and go to crop settings. So I showed you the basic settings that you would adjust here. There are advanced settings, and that's under show all. And I've done a pretty good job of explaining what those settings are under these little eyes. And you'll see as we go down here, let's see, we have some thresholds for the nitrogen in the soil, but we also have some target soil tensions. And so this is at 25. We don't want the soil to get much drier than 25 kilopascals, or this would be equivalent to centibars. That's in the top foot, and in the second foot, 20. So we use these sort of to set what the allowable depletion would be for that soil type. And based on the texture, the bulk density, that's how CropManage figures that out. If we put this target tension higher, which means essentially we'll allow the plant to remove more water out of the soil before irrigating, then the interval between irrigations would be recommended a little longer. So this is somewhere, if you found you were in agreement with these target tensions, you could change that right here. So there are a lot of sort of different things that could be adjusted here. And you really want to be knowledgeable what those values should be before you make changes. That would be my recommendation. You can always contact us if you want to know how to change some of these crop settings. But what we show you is the settings that are most easy. They're pretty intuitive of how to set those.
Okay, another question. How does the system estimate crop coefficient based on the canopy curve you showed?
Right. So for different commodities, we have relationships between fraction of cover and a crop coefficient. And so some of that, for example, Andre, he's doing a project in celery, working with our biometeorologists, and I'm doing something similar up here, where we're putting equipment out in the field to monitor directly what the ET is, and we are measuring the canopy cover. And so what we can do is use that information to calculate that the crop coefficient, because we're getting actual ET, and then we use the reference ET from the nearest weather station to figure out sort of backwards what the crop coefficient is. And then we relate that to canopy cover. And really what we're usually doing is figuring out, well, what's the maximum crop coefficient when it's at full canopy? Is it sort of at equal to a well-watered grass, which would be 1, or is it a little higher, maybe 1.1 or 1.2, or is it lower? So we make adjustments that way and come up with this relationship. And then I mentioned we do irrigation trials where with a lot of at least the vegetable crops, we have replicated trials and we put on different percentages of what's recommended and evaluate the biomass growth, the yield, marketable yield, and use that information to, again, readjust the crop coefficient canopy relationship. So that's basically how we do it. Do you want to add something, Andre, on that?
No, I think that's pretty on point. Yeah, it's perfect.
Okay.
Another question, do you plan in the future to use this platform for substrate crops?
it's a possibility, but what we'd probably be talking about is something in macro tunnels or in greenhouses. And so it gets a little more tricky to figure out what the water demand is. It's not, directly based off of reference ET. So it would take some new algorithms to do that. We don't have, the short answer is we don't have any plans yet. What we're just trying to do is get a lot of growers, in open fields to utilize CropManage. It's perfectly possible. With funding, we could make it work for substrate crops. It would be easier, if they were, say, in macro tunnels than in, closed greenhouses, with lighting. So it is definitely a possibility, but probably a little far out in the future. And speaking of commodities that we're working on in the future, we've been working on perennial crops, tree crops. So we have almonds and we have walnuts on there. Pretty soon we should have pistachio, and we'll be working on pears and prunes. So we have plenty of commodities to work on in California in just open fields.
Okay, another question. Can you talk about and show setting and using a soil depletion threshold?
Let's see, have you talked about setting and using I think I sort of have. I can show you a little bit more detail where we might see this. We have a lot of past, irrigations here, but if we go in this table, underwater, this is really sort of the end of the line in CropManage. So you have irrigation data here, and then you have additional water data. So here's where you see some KC values as you go through there. You see canopy, you see reference ET, and then way at the end here is available soil moisture. So this is where, changing the thresholds or changing some property of the soil would change, what your available moisture is. So right now it's at sort of set at 0.6 inches. Now say I go back into settings here, and I could go to advanced settings, or where it says show all. And it was here where the tension is what I was talking about. We could change that to something higher. So we change it, say, to 45. And I save this. And theoretically, it should change the available moisture. And this is sort of, an estimate of how much water you could deplete before the crop gets to, say, 45 centibars. And now, let's see if we see this. So back to water and additional data. Yeah, so now instead of 0.6, we could take out 0.9, which would affect, the interval of how often CropManage would recommend to irrigate. So here, now the intervals are longer. It's, see, the grower did 3 days, but it says actually you go to 5.4 days. And even we'll show you how it calculated that. So here's the available moisture. So before it was 0.6, now it's 0.95. and then it has the average ET per day. And so it just divides the inches by inches per day that the crop's using and comes up with 5.4 days. So it's really a pretty simple calculation there. A feature we are working on is to just show sort of visually what's going on from the beginning of the year or from December as you go through the season in terms of how much water is stored in your profile, not just what's available, but also, you know, how full is your profile. Because we realize for tree crops, that's really important because the roots are, you know, down there at 4 feet, 5 feet, sometimes utilizing water. So just to visually see, you know, how full your profile is would be useful. And I just want to emphasize, you know, this applied water can be just a quick way to see, you know, are you applying more or less than CropManage is recommending? And you see, you know, very quickly, yeah, the growers may be under applying, you know, and that could be because they desire a certain response in the crop. It could be visually or checking the soil. They see maybe the ET is not viewing the right number. There's a number of different reasons, or maybe there's something wrong, you know, with the settings for that crop, that it's just over estimating the canopy cover or something like that. But it does indicate that, you know, we're starting to get a difference here.
Last question I have here. The max planting area in the planting setting is 12. What if there is a bigger area?
Max planting. Let's see, I'm not sure. Let me find that question here. Max planting area in the planting settings is 12. You should be able to adjust a planting area to any size. So I'm not quite sure what they mean by max planting area. That's in the planting settings. Let me look. That might be for a particular crop. Let's see if we can find that. I'm going to go back to the UCC ranch. Maybe the cabbage. And this is planting settings. Let's see. Now it may be that you can't go larger than the planting area. Let's see. Well, that didn't seem to mind by going even to 45 or something like that. It will say that.
Hey, Mike.
Yeah.
We're getting close to the end of the webinar.
Yeah.
And you know, I couldn't understand that question either. So I guess we could ask this person who asked the question to maybe email us so we can address that, or maybe give us a phone call.
Yeah.
After that. Huh?
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So
Okay.
I feel like we covered, you know, most of what we planned to cover. Both Andre and I, you know, with your free registration, not free, with your $30 registration, unless it was free for you, you get us to consult with, you know, so you can call the CropManage hotline, or you can email Andre and get in touch with him. And we're always happy to help growers learn how to use CropManage or consultants. And so we hope the seminar was useful. Please give us feedback of how we could make it better for next time. We could, for example, have a seminar just for a certain group of commodities like trees or strawberries or vegetables. So if you want something like that, let us know.
I just want to add to, excuse me, to Michael's point of the registration. So we usually do these workshops for, at no cost, but we did have some costs with running this webinar. The program support unit has been very helpful, and a good portion of your registration cost goes to that. And also we will be hiring a translator to translate the workshop to Spanish. So that also has a cost. So that's why we're asking participants to contribute with the $30 registration fee. We'll be posting the link to these to the recordings of this webinar, and we'll be sending you an email with the link to that. In the next few days, we'll be also working with the translator to translate this in Spanish, and that will be also sent to all you guys who registered to this workshop. And what you see online is the QR code. In case you cannot scan these with your phone, bringing up your camera and scan these, or actually with the CCA app, you can email A&R program support, what you see on the screen, at ucanr.edu. You can email them your CCA number, and that will be forwarded to get you the CEUs for this meeting. With that, unless Michael has anything else to add, I would like to thank everybody for attending this workshop. Michael for managing and not only creating CropManage, but being around and helping with technical assistance and providing these extension opportunities. And also I'd like to extend a shout out to the A&R program support units for really stepping up to the plate and providing all the technical assistance we needed to provide this workshop. Mike, do you have anything else to add?
No, I just want to second what you said. We really appreciate the program support units help because during this period, we can't do any in-person presentations. So this is one way we can offer our services and extension. And hopefully, we get better at this and the presentations get smoother too. But I think it went relatively well for our first time trying to do this. So I really appreciate all your patience, all the participants, your patience in spending 3.5 hours with us on here in Salinas. It's a nice sunny day. So appreciate all your attention.
Well, thanks everybody. That concludes the webinar. And please send us any questions you have via email or phone call.